Another one of the mistakes that Christians often make about LGBTQ plus stuff is we tend to think of sex in terms of behavior. What behaviors are acceptable and what are unacceptable. For an LGBTQ plus person, somebody involved in that movement, yes, there are behaviors, there are clear sexual behaviors that serve to define that movement to some extent. But underlying it is the idea that actually what's going on is a matter of identity. The LGBTQ plus movement really rests on the idea that fundamentally definitive of who you are is not so much how you behave sexually, but the sexual desires you experience. Those are the things that define you as being who you are. So you can be a gay person who never engages in sexual activity. If your desires are for somebody of the same sex, then your sexual desires for somebody of the same sex, then you are a gay person, even if you never engage in any kind of physical gay sexual activity. That's an interesting development. Partly it's virtually unprecedented in human history that we now define ourselves in terms of our sexual desires. So there's an element of historical novelty about this. And secondly, it's an important point for Christians to grasp if we're going to understand the temperature, the political temperature that surrounds these discussions. It's often said, why is it such a big deal that a cake baker won't bake a cake for a gay wedding? Well, it's a big deal for the LGBTQ plus community because in refusing to bake a cake for a gay wedding, you're not simply depriving that person of an item of food, you're actually denying their identity. And I think that's where the challenge lies for Christians when they're thinking about these issues, is that we need to realize we are not simply debating the bounds of where legitimate and illegitimate Christian behavior begin and end. We're actually debating what it is that constitutes us as human beings. Should we define ourselves in terms of our sexual desires, be those desires gay or straight? Or should we define ourselves using some other register or point of reference? For Christians, of course, our identity is not to be rooted primarily in inner feelings, our desires, be they sexual or otherwise. Our identity is to be rooted by the fact that we are created in the image of God and united to Christ. And the Bible makes it very clear that that status we have, that identity we have, comes with certain imperatives relative to our behavior, some of which involve the nature of our sexual behavior. So it's not to say that we're to play the game of sexual identity and we just need to come up with a different sexual identity to that of the LGBTQ movement. We need to realize that our identities are not fundamentally or primarily sexual anyway. We're rooted in the image of God, rooted in our union with Christ, and that brings with it a framework of behavior of which sexual behavior, celibacy outside of marriage, chastity within it, is an important part of who we are and how we are to behave.